I'm Marcus Ellison, 41, CEO of Ellison Dynamics, a boutique data security firm I built from the ground up. I wasn't born into privilege or trust funds. Every inch of success I've earned came from coding late at night with only coffee and desperation for company, from cold calling clients who didn't know my name, from spending entire weekends testing vulnerabilities in systems until my eyes blurred. So when I met Riley, brilliant, warm, disarmingly beautiful, I let my guard down. I thought love could balance the scale between grit and privilege, that it could soften the edges that years of working in tech's back alleys had given me. I thought, maybe, just maybe, I'd finally earned that. I remember the day I met her parents like it's burned into my memory. We'd flown down to Napa for what Riley called a family weekend. Her family's estate was the kind of place that made my teeth ache with its casual display of generational wealth. White columns, manicured lawns, an infinity pool that seemed to pour right into the valley. I'd brought a bottle of small-batch bourbon as a gift, a nod to her father's fondness for whiskey. Riley had said he'd appreciate the gesture, that it would make things easier. I should have known then that easier didn't exist. When I stepped into the dining room, her mother, Celeste, was already there, standing by the fireplace like a queen with a wine glass in hand. She was immaculate, every strand of hair in place, her gaze sharp enough to peel paint. Riley's father, Lawrence, sat at the head of the table, a man whose presence felt less like an invitation and more like a challenge. They barely looked up when I entered. I forced a smile. Riley's hand was warm on my back. "Everyone, this is Marcus," she said, like she was introducing a new piece of furniture. I extended my hand to Celeste first. She didn't shake it. Instead, she tilted her glass slightly and let the wine, a deep, expensive red, spill across my face and down the front of my shirt. The heat of it hit my cheek first, then the chill seeped into my collar. I stood there, my hand still awkwardly outstretched, dripping. She smiled a thin, cruel twist of lips. "Just disinfecting the poor boy," she said, as if that explained everything. Riley let out a giggle, light and airy, as if her mother's gesture was a party trick. My pulse thundered in my ears. I turned to her, waiting for her to say something, to defend me, to tell her mother that I wasn't a virus. But Riley just laughed again and picked up her glass. I felt my shoulders stiffen, the way they always did when I was 16 and someone's father asked why I was at the nice part of town. I reached for a napkin, dabbed at my face, then set it down carefully. Lawrence shifted in his seat, cleared his throat, but said nothing. Celeste, emboldened by the silence, set her glass down with a flourish. "If you want to marry my daughter," she said, her voice dripping with condescension, "it's going to cost you. For $100,000, paid directly to our family, to make sure you can marry her properly." A gesture of goodwill. She looked so pleased with herself, like she'd just solved a complicated math problem. I looked at Riley again. Her lips twitched into a smirk, and she raised her glass as if to toast the absurdity. In that moment, everything clicked into place, the too easy laughter, the way she'd never asked what I drove or how much I made, the way she'd never actually defended me when her friends called me Marcus from the wrong side. I saw it all then, the whole game. I'd been a means to an end. A project. A punchline. My chest felt tight, but my voice came out calm. "For $100,000, I repeated, letting the number hang in the air like a bad smell. I met Celeste's eyes, then Lawrence's. Then I turned back to Riley and studied the woman I'd thought I'd loved. She didn't even have the decency to look away. I realized then that love can't always be enough. Sometimes love is just another contract, another deal made over dinner and drinks. I took a slow breath, let the anger simmer instead of boil. I'd learned long ago that quiet men are underestimated, that calm men are the ones who hold the real power. I folded my napkin carefully, set it on the table. Then I turned to Lawrence, because he was the one who mattered, really, and I let the truth come out like a blade. "Lawrence," I said evenly, effective immediately, "Ellison Dynamics is severing all business contracts with Caldwell and Rowe Systems." His eyes widened, and I saw the mask of calm slip. He opened his mouth, but I didn't give him the chance. "You've depended on us for 3 years. We kept your systems from collapsing, your supply lines from stalling. That stops today." I leaned in just enough so he could see the steel in my eyes. "I don't pay to marry anyone. I don't buy respect. I earned every bit of who I am, and I won't let anyone, no matter how many vineyards they own, tell me otherwise." The room went silent except for the ticking of the grandfather clock in the corner. Riley's smile froze. Celeste's eyes darted to her husband. Lawrence looked pale, like he'd just swallowed glass. I stood, my chair scraping the floor, and I wiped the last of the wine from my face with the sleeve of my shirt. My voice was steady, final. You can keep your wine, your demands, your insults. I don't negotiate with people who throw wine in my face and call it disinfectant. I let that settle. Then I turned, walked to the door, and paused just long enough to look back at Riley. You could have had me, I said quietly. But you chose them. Then I walked out. Outside, the sun was setting over the vineyards, throwing long shadows across the manicured grass. My shirt was stained and my shoes felt too tight, but I'd never felt freer. I'd fought my way out of every dark alley life had thrown at me, and I wasn't about to be cornered by a family who measured worth in dollar signs. I didn't look back as I climbed into my car. As the engine hummed to life, I rolled down the window, letting the crisp air wash over me. I could still taste the wine, but it didn't matter. I had my dignity, and that was worth more than every glass of vintage in that mansion. I'm Marcus Ellison, and the night after walking out of Riley's family home, I found myself back at the office, staring at the glowing skyline of San Francisco like it might hold the answers I needed. My name shone on the door, Ellison Dynamics, etched in glass and steel, a testament to years of grinding when most people would have called it quits. But that night, it felt different, like the name had become both a shield and a target. Riley's father, Lawrence Caldwell, ran Caldwell and Rose Systems, a legacy electronics firm that I'd been propping up for 3 years with contracts that should have been their lifeline. But now, every time I thought of their name, I felt the sour taste of betrayal thickening in my mouth. It all started back at that business summit in Vancouver. I'd been there to pitch a revolutionary data protection protocol, a fusion of adaptive encryption and AI-based threat detection. I was supposed to present it to a room full of skeptical investors who'd rather spend money on the next social app than on real cybersecurity. Riley was there, too, standing near the espresso cart in a tailored navy dress that made her look like she'd stepped out of a boardroom calendar. She'd laughed at my joke about the conference center's lukewarm coffee, then asked about my work in a way that didn't feel forced. I remember the way she leaned in, eyes bright with curiosity. She told me she admired people who built things from nothing. I believed her. I wanted to. I'd always been hungry for that kind of connection, someone who didn't care how much I made or what I drove, but who saw the person behind the pitch deck. So I let my guard down. I let her in. We had dinners that turned into late-night walks along the waterfront, conversations that felt real. She'd bring me breakfast after I'd spent the night debugging a new security protocol, her smile warming up the sterile glow of my office. She told me about her family, but always with a tinge of embarrassment, a father with too many vintage cars, a mother who collected designer handbags like they were trophies, a house that felt like a hotel lobby. She'd roll her eyes and say, "You know, that's not me. I hate that kind of show." And I wanted to believe her. I did. But now I sat there in my office, replaying every smile she'd given me, every time she'd brushed her hair behind her ear and told me she couldn't wait to meet my parents. None of it felt solid anymore. It felt like a script she'd learned by heart. The thought made my hands clench into fists on my desk. My phone buzzed. Dion, my COO, sharp and fearless, always a step ahead of me. "You okay?" Her text read. She'd stayed late the night before, prepping contingency plans and supplier lists, because that's who Dion was. She never assumed the storm would pass. She planned for the worst. I called her back instead of texting. "Hey," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "You're thinking about them, aren't you?" she asked without preamble. She had that way of cutting through the noise. "Yeah," I admitted. 3 years, Dion. 3 years we've kept their systems from crashing into the Stone Age. I thought, my voice caught. I thought Riley saw me. You know? Not the contract. Not the money. Just me. She was quiet for a moment, and then she said, "Marcus, Lawrence Caldwell is a legacy player. He's always been too proud to admit he's obsolete. We gave him a lifeline, and he treated you like the help. Riley, she grew up in that world. She may have liked you, but she didn't stand up for you. And that says everything." I let her words sink in. Dion was right. She always was. I thought back to that imported marble table, the way Celeste wine had felt warm on my face, the way Riley had laughed. Not a small, embarrassed laugh, no, a full-bodied giggle like she was in on the joke. Like I'd been the punchline all along. "Cutting ties is going to hurt them more than it hurts us," Dion continued. "Their logistics and procurement rely on our software. Without us, they'll be scrambling to patch the holes. We've got newer clients, bigger fish to fry. Let them feel the sting." I took a deep breath, staring at the framed photo of my parents on my desk. Dad in his janitor uniform, Mom still in her teaching smock. I built this for them, too, for the sacrifices they'd made to keep the lights on, to buy me a second-hand laptop so I could teach myself to code. I'm not angry, Dion, I said finally. Just disappointed. I thought Riley would be different. She's not, Dion said bluntly. You're playing chess, Marcus. They're playing Monopoly. You can't expect them to see you as anything but a square on their board. Her words cut, but they also freed me. I couldn't keep letting the memory of Riley's smile cloud my judgment. You're right, I said, feeling the calm settle in my chest. Let's move forward. Sever the contract, all of them. Effective immediately. You sure? Dion asked. That's a lot of revenue walking out the door. I'm sure, I said, my voice steady. We're not here to be someone's charity case or their ATM. We earned every contract we have. And we'll earn the next ones, too. Damn right, she said. I'll get legal on it. We'll draft the letters. You'll get the first draft by morning. I hung up and let the silence of my office wrap around me. The city lights sparkled outside, but inside, it felt like all the noise had finally died down. I pulled up the Caldwell and Rowe Systems file, rows of invoices, project updates, system diagrams. My eyes scanned the numbers, the lines of code, the notes I'd made in the margins. 3 years of work that kept their warehouses running, their shipments on time, their reputation just barely afloat. And this is how they'd repaid me. I hit archive on the file. Then I stood, stretching my back, feeling the tension slowly ease. I wasn't angry anymore. I was focused. This was my company. My name on the glass. My story. No one, no matter how many glasses of wine they could afford to throw, was going to define me by their standards. I'd worked too hard for that. I'd sacrificed too much. As I turned off the lights and locked the office door behind me, I felt a calm resolve. Let them figure out how to keep their company running without me. Let them scramble to find someone else to patch their crumbling systems. I'd given them every chance to treat me like an equal, and they'd failed. On the drive home, the city blurred past in streaks of red and white. I rolled the window down, letting the wind whip through my hair. A new chapter had started, and for the first time in weeks, I felt like I could breathe. Because even if I'd lost Riley, even if I'd walked away from a lucrative contract, I'd kept the one thing that mattered more than any client, my dignity. And that's a currency no one could ever take from me. The conference room was too bright, the kind of sterile, corporate light that made everyone's faces look washed out and tired. I sat at the far end of the table, my mind still replaying Celeste's words. For $100,000, that's the price of marrying into respect. It wasn't just the words that stung, it was Riley's laugh, that easy, breezy laugh that suggested this was all some elaborate party trick, and I was the punchline. She'd sipped her wine, eyes glinting, as if it was funny that her mother treated me like something she needed to disinfect before I could touch her daughter. And her father, Lawrence, he'd sat there, dignified in that tired, old-money way, eyes darting between his wife and me, but saying nothing. His silence felt louder than her insults. Because silence, I'd learned, is the strongest form of approval. I'd grown up around people who used silence like a weapon. A father who'd skip dinner rather than talk about a missed rent payment. A mother who'd hide bruises behind excuses and tight smiles. Silence meant agreement. It meant compliance. It meant the people who could have spoken for you chose not to. In that moment, at that imported marble table with wine dripping down my shirt, I realized Riley had never defended me. Not once. She'd sat by, letting her mother treat me like a poor boy unworthy of her trust fund. I'd fallen in love with the idea of her laughter, her quick wit, the way she'd bring me coffee after a late night in the office. I'd mistaken her curiosity for empathy, her charm for loyalty. But when push came to shove, she'd let her mother toss wine in my face like I was something that needed cleaning. My phone buzzed on the table, jarring me out of my thoughts. It was Dion, my COO. Her text was short, sharp. PR on standby. Let's talk. She was already anticipating the fallout. She always did. That was why I'd hired her, because she thought 3 steps ahead while I was still figuring out the next move. I thumbed a reply. Give me an hour. I needed a minute to process the anger before I put my CEO face back on. I leaned back in my chair and stared at the ceiling. The hum of the HVAC system was the only sound in the room. I thought about the day I met Riley, how she'd laughed at my joke about the conference coffee tasting like burnt promises. She'd leaned in, eyes bright, and said she admired people who built things from scratch. I believed her. I'd wanted to, because I built my life from scratch. Every client, every contract, every dollar. I didn't have a family legacy to fall back on. I had sweat, grit, and the constant feeling that I had to prove I belonged. And I'd let her in. That was the part that hurt the most. I'd let her see the cracks, late nights at the office, the pictures of my parents taped to my monitor, the calluses on my hands from years of coding. I'd let her believe she was different, that she saw me. But the truth was she saw a project, an interesting challenge, a poor boy she could present to her parents like a prize until it got complicated. A knock at the door broke my thoughts. Jonas, my assistant, stuck his head in. Marcus? Dion's ready for you in the conference room. His eyes darted to the coffee cup in front of me. Can I get you a fresh one? I shook my head. No, thanks, Jonas. I'll head over now. I grabbed my laptop, the weight of it grounding me, and headed down the hall. The floor-to-ceiling windows on either side reflected my face back at me, sharp features, tired eyes, a jaw set just a little too tight. I'd built this place to be modern, open, a testament to the transparency I believed business should be. Today, it felt like every window was a mirror I couldn't escape. Dion was already at the head of the table, laptop open, a stack of documents at her elbow. She wore that same sharp gray suit she always wore when she was ready to get things done. She didn't waste time on small talk. I've started drafting the termination letters, she said without preamble. All Caldwell and Rowe contracts. I've also flagged their upcoming invoices. They're going to feel this. I nodded, taking the seat across from her. Good, I said. My voice felt steady, even though my hands still itched with the memory of that wine on my skin. They earned this. Every single bit of it. She leaned back, arms crossed. You okay? She asked, her eyes narrowing. Really okay? I hesitated, then let out a slow breath. No, I admitted. But I will be. She laughed, Dion. She sat there and laughed while her mother treated me like garbage. I thought she was different. I thought she got it. Dion's face softened, just a touch. Marcus, people like her. They think they can buy respect. They think money is the same as loyalty. But you've earned every inch of this place. She gestured around the conference room. Don't let them make you forget that. Her words settled over me like a bomb. I needed to hear them. I needed to remember why I'd built this company in the first place, to prove that people like me didn't need permission to succeed. We made our own way. Thanks, I said, my voice low. We'll send the letters today. And Dion. She raised an eyebrow. Yeah, make sure every exit is clean. I don't want them to have any reason to drag this out in court. We did everything by the book. Let's keep it that way. She smiled, a real, genuine smile. Already on it, boss. We're not the ones who broke the contract. I nodded, feeling the first hint of clarity since that dinner. Right? I said. They did. I stood, straightening my jacket. I'm done being their project. From now on, they can find someone else to buy respect from. As I walked out of the conference room, I felt a quiet strength settle in my chest. The kind that doesn't come from titles or money, but from knowing exactly who you are and refusing to let anyone define you otherwise. That was my legacy, and no one could take that from me. Back at my office in the Presidio, the glow of the San Francisco skyline bathed the room in that soft, electric haze that makes everything feel temporary, like a promise waiting to be broken. I stood at the window, arms crossed, watching headlights wind down Lombard Street, thinking about all the nights I'd sat at this very desk, coding until my eyes burned. I'd always thought that hard work earned respect, that if I just built something good enough, no one could question whether I belonged. But sitting across from Riley's mother, wine dripping from my face, I realized I'd been wrong. Respect isn't earned in that world, it's demanded. And I wasn't for sale. Dion was already in my office, papers spread across the table, her laptop open, fingers flying across the keys. She'd always been the most reliable person in my life, sharp, fearless, a second pair of eyes that never missed the details I was too busy to catch. She'd once told me, half joking, that if I ever ran for president, she'd be the one fixing my mistakes before they became headlines. She was right. She looked up as I closed the door behind me. I've got drafts of the termination letters, she said, tapping the screen. Clean, professional, no room for argument. We're done with them. Her eyes glinted, fierce in that way that made me trust her with everything. Good, I said. They'll probably come after us, try to negotiate. I don't want any of it. We're done. I sank into my chair, letting the weight of the decision settle. My gut told me they'd try every trick in the book. Legal threats, back-channel deals, maybe even more insults. I was ready. I'd been underestimated my whole life, and that had become my secret weapon. Dion leaned forward, her fingers steepled. Lawrence called twice already. I didn't answer. He'll probably reach out directly to you. You want to take it? I shook my head. No. Let him stew. We've carried them long enough. If they want to talk, they can do it through legal. No more favors. No more discounts. No more pretending we're partners. My voice was calm, even. That surprised me a little. I'd expected to feel a tremor, a crack in my resolve. But all I felt was relief. She smiled, a small, satisfied smile. It's the right move, she said. They've been using us. We gave them lifelines they didn't even know they needed. Without us, they'll have to face the reality they've been dodging for years. I thought of the reports Jonas had pulled together, the audit that showed just how fragile Caldwell and Rowe's infrastructure really was. Their systems were outdated, half-patched, running on tech from the early 2000s that I'd propped up with modern security measures. They'd come to us 3 years ago, desperate to modernize, to keep pace with their competitors. I'd stepped in, overhauled their logistics, built them a cloud migration plan, secured their databases. All of it, done quietly, efficiently, no fanfare. I didn't need a headline. I just needed their trust. But it had never been about trust for them. It had been about control. And now, without me, they'd have to stand on their own. My phone buzzed. A text from Riley. You embarrassed me in front of my parents. We were building something. I thought you understood us. Us. Like she'd ever been on my side. Like she'd ever defended me. My jaw tightened. I typed back, fingers steady. No, Riley. I was building something. You just wanted the view from the top. I hit send and let the silence swallow any regrets. She didn't reply. Dion watched me, her eyes sharp. You okay? She asked, a note of concern threading through her usually even voice. I looked at her, and for a moment, I wanted to say no. I wanted to say that it hurt like hell, that the betrayal cut deeper than I'd let on. But I'd spent my whole life learning that admitting pain was a luxury I couldn't afford. So I straightened my spine and nodded. Yeah, I said. Better than I was yesterday. And that was the truth. Yesterday, I'd been a man with a foot in 2 worlds, hers and mine. Today, I knew exactly where I stood. Dion stood too, gathering the papers. I'll get these sent out, she said. And I'll make sure Jonas is ready to field any calls. We've got your back. I smiled, a small, grateful smile. I know, I said. I wouldn't have made it this far without you, Dion. She waved me off. Don't get sentimental on me, Ellison, she teased, but her eyes softened. You earned this place. Don't let them make you doubt that. As she left, the office felt quieter, but not empty. More like a space waiting to be filled with something better. I turned back to my laptop, pulling up the list of newer clients we'd been courting: government agencies, high-level defense contractors, the kind of contracts that didn't care about my background or my bank account. They cared about results, about security, about the fact that Ellison Dynamics delivered every time. I drafted a quick email to our legal team, instructing them to finalize the contract cancellations. I wanted it airtight. No lingering ties, no backdoors for them to crawl through later. We'd given them a chance to treat us with respect. They'd failed. Now it was time to move on. The door opened again, Jonas this time, holding a stack of messages. A lot of calls today, he said, his voice low. Some of the Caldwell and Rowe staff are already reaching out. Looks like they're worried. Let them worry, I said. We did our job. They're on their own now. I stood, rolling my shoulders, feeling the tension slowly ease. Jonas, make sure the team knows we're prioritizing the new contracts. I don't want any delays. We're moving forward. He nodded. Got it, boss. And Marcus. He hesitated, eyes meeting mine. Good call, walking away. Not everyone would have done it. I met his gaze, seeing the respect there, the quiet loyalty that had kept him working late nights with me when we were just a scrappy startup trying to make payroll. Thanks, Jonas, I said. I learned a long time ago that respect isn't given. You've got to take it. He smiled and left, leaving me alone with the city lights. I sat back down, letting the hum of the office fill the space. The pain of Riley's betrayal still sat in my chest like a stone, but it felt different now, less like a wound, more like a lesson. I'd trusted her. I'd let her in, and she'd show me exactly who she was when the moment came. That laugh, that smirk, the way she'd sipped her wine while her mother humiliated me. I would never forget it. but I'd also never let it define me. I'd spent too many years proving myself to people who didn't think I belonged. I wasn't about to start asking for permission now. I was done being the outsider, the poor boy trying to impress the rich. From now on, I was just Marcus Ellison, CEO, builder, fighter. And if they couldn't handle that, that was their problem, not mine. The morning sun crept in through the slats of my office blinds, casting thin lines of light across the floor like bars on a cell. But I didn't feel trapped. I felt focused. Jonas had handed me a folder thick with printouts, audits, financial statements, project summaries, notes scribbled in his precise handwriting. The first page was the report I'd asked for, an audit on Caldwell and Rowe. My fingers tightened on the paper as I scanned the lines. Bleeding cash. A term I'd used before, but this time it felt different. This time it was personal. I'd asked Jonas to dig deep, past the numbers they paraded in glossy annual reports, past the press releases crafted by their overpaid PR firms. I wanted the truth, the unvarnished look at what kept their so-called legacy firm afloat. What I found was a mess of bandages and patches, duct tape on century-old pipelines. Their servers were outdated, their logistics were held together with spreadsheets and hope, and their customer service hotline, one I'd had the displeasure of calling during my earliest contract days, was manned by temps who couldn't tell a router from a rotary phone. Jonas had highlighted key findings in yellow, his neat notes in the margins. Cash flow crisis in Q2, vendor payments delayed 90-plus days, pending litigation over patent infringement. I shook my head. They needed me more than I ever needed them. All those dinners and handshakes, all those big smiles from Lawrence while his wife pretended I was the dirt on her shoes. None of it had been about partnership. It had been about survival. They'd seen me as a lifeline. And the second they thought they didn't need me, when they thought their daughter could be the bridge between worlds, I'd been disposable. But I wasn't some boy from Oakland who didn't know how the game was played. I'd watch my mother clip coupons and teach summer school just to keep the power on. I'd watch my father get up at 5 a.m. every day, pulling double shifts in a warehouse so we wouldn't get evicted. I knew how to survive. More importantly, I knew how to win. My phone buzzed on the desk. Unknown number. I picked up, pressing the speaker button with a cold calm I'd learned in every backroom negotiation. Ellison, I said. A pause, then a deep voice. Marcus, it's Lawrence Caldwell. His tone was measured, but I could hear the tightness, the strain at the edges. Like he'd been practicing this call in his head for hours. Lawrence, I replied evenly, leaning back in my chair. What can I do for you? He cleared his throat. Let's be reasonable, he began, and I nearly laughed. Reasonable. That was rich, coming from a man who'd watched his wife throw wine in my face and then sat back like he was in a private theater box. Our families could benefit from unity, he continued. Riley, she's devastated. We all are. I think we let things get out of hand. There's no reason for us to let this affect our businesses. I let the silence stretch. I learned that in boardrooms, sometimes the best way to get to the truth was to say nothing at all. Finally, I said, Unity? That's an interesting word coming from a man who sat in silence while his wife tried to humiliate me. And Riley, my voice hardened. She's not my concern anymore. Lawrence let out a sigh. Marcus, you're letting your pride get in the way. I admit Celeste overstepped, but I cut him off. Overstepped? I said, my voice low and sharp. She poured wine in my face like I was dirt on her shoe, and you did nothing. That's not overstepping, Lawrence. That's telling me exactly what you think of me. And now you want me to pretend like that never happened. I could practically hear him shrinking on the other end of the line. No, I continued, my voice calm. I'd rather burn my own company down than share it with people who think respect has a price tag. He stammered, Marcus, be reasonable. I hung up. The click of the call ending was the most satisfying sound I'd heard in days. Jonas poked his head in a second later, his eyes wide. Was that? Yeah, I said. Lawrence. Trying to salvage what's left. I tossed the phone onto the desk. He doesn't get it. He never did. Jonas set down a fresh stack of files. We've already got 3 new inquiries from potential clients, he said, his tone bright. Novamind Defense is asking if we'd be interested in a partnership. They said they've been watching us for a while. A smile tugged at the corner of my mouth. Novamind. That was a name that carried weight. Government contracts, national security, the kind of work that required discretion and ironclad reliability. The kind of work that didn't care if your parents were rich or if you'd clawed your way up from nothing. They only cared if you could deliver. And I could. Every single time. Set up a call, I said. I want to hear what they're offering. I stood and paced to the window, staring out at the bay. The sun was higher now, turning the water into a sheet of silver. Jonas, I said, turning to face him, I don't ever want to be in a position again where someone thinks they can buy me. Ever. He nodded, his face serious. I'll make sure of it. I clapped him on the shoulder. Good. Let's get to work. As he left, I felt the weight in my chest start to lift, replaced by something stronger, a sense of purpose, of clarity. I wasn't just walking away from Caldwell and Rowe. I was stepping into something better, something that didn't ask me to trade my dignity for a seat at the table. I glanced at the audit one last time. Bleeding cash. No wonder they'd come crawling back. But I wasn't their lifeline anymore. Let them learn to swim or sink on their own. I had my own legacy to build, one that didn't require anyone's permission. I reached for the phone and dialed Dion. She answered on the first ring. Ready, she said. Let's move forward on Nova Mind, I said. And Dion, no discounts. No favors. We earned every inch of this. She laughed, a sharp, satisfied sound. Damn right, Marcus. I'll get the ball rolling. As I hung up, I let the smile settle on my face. For the first time in days, I felt like I was standing on solid ground. And the best part? I'd put myself there. Word travels fast in San Francisco's tech circles, but even I was surprised how quickly the news spread. It started with a trickle. A few quiet calls from reporters who'd picked up whispers that Ellison Dynamics had terminated all contracts with Caldwell and Rowe Systems. I fielded them with careful words, telling them what they needed to know. Ethical incompatibility, contractual misalignment, business decisions. I learned that corporate language could be both a shield and a sword, diplomatic enough to deflect lawsuits, sharp enough to leave a scar. But it was Jude Morelli, a young but sharp business journalist with an eye for blood in the water, who turned the story into a headline that stuck. Old money, new consequences, Jude's article declared in the San Francisco Times. A picture of the Caldwell and Rowe building, its proud columns and polished brass, sat next to a smaller, less polished photo of me at a conference, wearing my standard open-collar shirt and that tired but defiant smile. I'd given her a quote, a cautious one. We believe in partnerships built on respect, not hierarchy. It wasn't a dagger, but it was enough. Within a week, Caldwell and Rowe's investors started calling their board. Their CTO, a quiet guy named Marvin, resigned 2 days later. Their head of marketing jumped ship to a competitor. Lawrence stepped down under the weight of it all, his carefully groomed reputation crumbling under the scrutiny. Celeste vanished from social media, her usual stream of luxury photos and power couple dinners replaced with silence. I didn't celebrate. I didn't gloat. I just watched. Sometimes a house falls from the inside long before the walls give way. I knew that truth better than most. I was in my office when Dion walked in with a grin that told me she'd already heard the latest. She set her phone on my desk. Jude Morelli wants a follow-up. She says you're the man who proved that old money doesn't get to make the rules anymore. I raised an eyebrow. That's a hell of a headline. I leaned back, studying Dion. What do you think? She shrugged, eyes sharp. I think it's true. They thought they owned the table. You flipped it. She paused. Marcus, you did the right thing. You didn't just stand up for yourself. You showed every guy like you, every girl like me, that dignity isn't for sale. Her words settled over me like a warm blanket. But the truth was, I didn't feel victorious. Not really. I felt relieved. Like I'd finally closed a door I'd been too afraid to lock. Thanks, Dion, I said. Get back to her. Tell her I'll give her a comment, but no photos. Let the story be about the work, not the man. She smirked. Always the humble hero. She turned to leave, then paused, her smile fading a bit. Marcus, you know this isn't the end of it, right? Caldwell and Rowe's going to fight. They've got lawyers, family connections, backroom favors. They're going to spin this every way they can. I nodded, my jaw tightening. Let them. I'm not afraid of them anymore. I paused, staring out the window at the city below. They tried to make me small. I didn't let them. I looked back at her. That's all that matters. She studied me for a moment longer, then nodded and left. The door closed softly behind her, leaving me alone with the low hum of my computer and the memories of that dinner, the wine, the laughter, the price tag Celeste had attached to her daughter's hand in marriage. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. They'd underestimated me. People like them always did. They saw a name on a contract, not the years of sweat and sacrifice that had built it. They saw my lack of a pedigree as a liability. They'd been wrong. A ping from my laptop pulled me from my thoughts. It was an email from an old friend, Kevin Tran, a cybersecurity consultant who'd once shared a beer with me in a dingy basement in Oakland while we both tried to get our first clients. His subject line was simple: congratulations. I opened the email. Marcus saw the story. Been a long time since we hustled that R&D lab together. Proud of you, man. You taught me that respect isn't something you beg for. It's something you build. Let's grab a drink soon. My treat this time. I smiled, the memory of those days, broken computers, cheap coffee, and shared dreams flooding back. I hit reply. Thanks, Kevin. Let's make that drink happen. You bring the beer. I'll bring the stories. I hit send, feeling the warmth of his words in my chest. Another ping, this one from an unfamiliar address. I opened it cautiously. It was from someone at a competitor, a small, scrappy firm like mine used to be. The message was short but powerful. We've all been there. Watching your story unfold gave us hope. Thanks for reminding us that we don't have to bow to them. Respect from everyone at Novatech. I leaned back, letting the screen blur for a second. Maybe Dion was right. Maybe it wasn't just about me. Maybe it was about everyone who'd ever been told they didn't belong, who'd been made to feel like the poor kid in the fancy living room. Maybe that was my real victory, not the contracts I'd gained or the clients I'd kept, but the dignity I'd refused to sell. I closed the email and stood, stretching. The city outside felt different now. Less like an opponent, more like a field waiting to be played. I walked over to the window and rested my palm against the glass. The skyline glowed with the promise of opportunity. It felt earned. Jonas knocked and stuck his head in. Hey, Marcus. Dion's got the draft for the Novamind contract. Want to take a look? I turned, the weight of the last few weeks shifting into something lighter. Yeah, Jonas. Let's see it. He handed me the folder, and I flipped it open, scanning the lines with a practiced eye. Solid terms. Respectful. No strings. Exactly how I wanted it. As I signed my name, I thought of Celeste's laugh, of Lawrence's cold stare, of Riley's giggle at the dinner table. Let them keep their wine. Let them keep their brand of respect. I built something better, something that couldn't be bought or thrown in someone's face. I built a company that believed in the value of dignity, of earned respect, of partnerships that didn't come with strings or bribes. And as I set the pin down, I realized I hadn't just flipped the table. I'd built a new one, and I got to choose who sat at it. Caldwell and Rose spiraled like a ship with a hole in its hull, water pouring in faster than anyone could bail it out. It wasn't loud or theatrical. It was quiet, a slow disintegration of power, influence, and credibility. I'd seen it happen before to competitors and clients who thought reputation alone was enough to stay afloat. They never saw the cracks until it was too late. I watched from the safety of my own ship, calm and unbothered. Dion kept me updated with quiet efficiency. Every day, another executive resigned. Another key client walked away. Another investor pulled out. The dominoes fell one by one. Their CTO was the first big name to jump ship, leaving behind a letter of resignation that was equal parts apology and self-preservation. Marcus, Dion said, forwarding me the email, he basically admitted he couldn't keep their systems secure without our support. He said their data architecture was years behind. He didn't even trust the firewall. I'd known that, of course, but it still hit different hearing it from someone who'd been on the inside. I'd propped them up because I believed, naively, I suppose, that helping them meant building a partnership. I'd thought Riley's family would see the value in what I'd created, that they'd appreciate what I'd done for them. But I'd been wrong. They hadn't wanted a partner. They'd wanted a servant. And I was no one's servant. Their head of marketing resigned next, citing irreconcilable ethical differences. I read between the lines. She didn't want to be associated with a firm whose biggest scandal was the CEO's wife pouring wine on her future son-in-law's face. Investors started calling their board, asking the questions that no one wanted to answer. Where had all the money gone? Why had they been so reliant on a boutique security firm for their core systems? Why hadn't they built something sustainable? It was a question I'd asked myself 100 times. And now, finally, they were asking it too. Dion kept her finger on the pulse, sending me updates like clockwork. Lawrence is out, she texted one morning, the message short and direct. Board forced him to resign. They're in crisis mode. I stared at the screen, imagining the scene. Lawrence, the proud patriarch, the man who'd watched his wife humiliate me without a word, being forced to step down from the company he'd inherited like a family heirloom. I didn't feel triumphant. I just felt quiet, like the last piece had fallen into place. Celeste, the wine-throwing queen herself, had vanished from social media, her carefully curated life of luxury reduced to silence. No more photos of five-star dinners. No more posts about the right kind of people. It was like she'd disappeared, leaving only the memory of her smirk behind. I wondered if she'd ever thought about what she'd done that night. If she'd realized that in one moment of arrogance, she'd set in motion the collapse of everything they'd built. Probably not. People like her rarely do. Riley was the last to reach out. Her message came at 2 in the morning, a final, desperate plea in a sea of chaos. "We could have had it all," she wrote, her words tinged with regret and blame. I stared at the screen, remembering the way she'd laughed at her mother's insult, the way she'd smiled while I wiped wine from my face. We could have had it all. Maybe. But she'd chosen them. And in choosing them, she'd chosen this. I typed my reply slowly, each word deliberate. "We did, until you chose them over me." I hit send and felt the weight lift off my chest. I didn't block her. I didn't need to. Some ghosts don't need exorcising. They just fade on their own. The days that followed felt strangely peaceful. My office, usually a hive of controlled chaos, settled into a quiet rhythm. Dion and Jonas worked seamlessly, handling the calls, the new contracts, the influx of opportunities that came with our newfound reputation. It felt like everyone wanted a piece of Ellison Dynamics now. The firm that had stood up to old money. The company that didn't compromise its values for a contract. It was the kind of reputation I'd spent years hoping to build, but never dared to imagine would come from walking away. One afternoon, as the fog rolled in from the bay, I found myself in the conference room, staring out at the Golden Gate Bridge, its towers half-shrouded in mist. Dion walked in with a cup of coffee, setting it in front of me without a word. She'd always known when I needed the caffeine more than the conversation. She took the seat across from me, her expression calm. "You okay?" she asked, her tone even. I nodded, though the answer was more complicated than that. "Yeah," I said. "Better than I thought I'd be." I paused, turning the cup in my hands. "It's strange, Dion. I thought when this was over, I'd feel vindicated, victorious. But I don't. I just feel like I've finally closed a chapter." She tilted her head, studying me like she always did. "Maybe that's what victory looks like," she said. "Not standing over their ashes, but standing on your own 2 feet. Knowing you didn't have to become them to win." Her words settled over me, a quiet truth I hadn't realized I'd been waiting for. I smiled. "Yeah," I said. "Maybe you're right." I looked out at the bridge, its towers strong against the fog. I didn't have to burn them down. They did that themselves. All I had to do was walk away. She smiled too, her eyes warm. "Exactly." She stood, gathering her notes. "I've got a meeting with the legal team. We're finalizing the new contracts with Novamind. It's a big one, Marcus. The kind of partnership that changes everything." I nodded, feeling the weight of the moment. "Good," I said. "That's the kind of legacy I want. Partnerships that matter. Built on respect. Earned, not bought." She paused at the door. "That's why you're different, Marcus. That's why they couldn't beat you." And with that, she was gone, leaving me alone with my thoughts and the quiet hum of a company that felt stronger than ever. I turned back to the window, watching as the fog wrapped around the bridge like a secret. I thought about Riley, about Lawrence, about Celeste. I didn't wish them ill. I just wished them honesty. The kind of honesty I demanded for myself, the kind that didn't come with a price tag. And as I stood there, I felt the first real breath of freedom. No more apologies. No more explanations. No more negotiating for respect. Just me, Marcus Ellison, standing tall on the foundation I'd built, ready for whatever came next. After everything had unraveled at Caldwell and Rowe, my office finally felt like home again. The hum of conversation outside my glass walls, the rhythmic clack of keyboards, and the faint smell of roasted coffee from the break room, it all felt like a promise that I was exactly where I needed to be. Ellison Dynamics had always been more than a company to me. It was a testament to everything I'd fought for: respect, independence, and the right to build something on my own terms. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the view of the bay. The Golden Gate Bridge stretched across the water like a red thread binding together the fog and the sun. My parents had visited last weekend, and the memory still warmed me. They'd arrived in their modest car, Dad's voice full of awe as he said, "Marcus, this place is something else." We grilled burgers on the patio of my new home overlooking the city, laughing at stories from the old neighborhood. There were no demands, no price tags attached to affection. Just love, real, earned, and quiet. the way peace should feel. Dion knocked and stepped in, carrying a folder brimming with notes. Her presence always steadied me. She was the engine that kept the ship moving, sharp and loyal. Marcus, she said, closing the door behind her. We got confirmation on the merger with Novamind Defense. Signed, sealed, and approved. Their CTO was practically singing your praises on the call. The most secure systems in the business, he said. Exactly who we want on our side. I felt a smile pull at the corners of my mouth. That's good, I said, though it was more than good. It was validation. Novamind Defense wasn't some mid-level contract. They were a key player in national defense, and working with them meant high-level government contracts, visibility, and trust. The kind of partnership that would solidify Ellison Dynamics' reputation for years. Dion sat down across from me, her eyes steady. It's more than good, she said, reading my thoughts. It's the kind of contract that would have been impossible if you'd still been tied to Caldwell and Rowe. You did the right thing, Marcus. Walking away wasn't just personal. It was smart. I nodded, letting her words sink in. Yeah, I said. It feels like we've finally closed that chapter. Like we've stepped into something better. She smiled. We have. And not just because of Novamind. The team is different now. Stronger. They respect you because you stood your ground. You didn't let them buy you. Her words reminded me of the countless nights I'd spent in this office, long after everyone else had gone home. I'd stare at the ceiling, thinking about all the people who'd told me I didn't belong, that I was just a scrappy kid from Oakland who'd gotten lucky. But luck didn't build Ellison Dynamics. It was built on hard work, on refusing to bend, on knowing my worth even when others tried to assign me a price. I thought of that dinner with Riley's family, the wine dripping down my shirt, her mother's smirk. And I thought of Lawrence's call, his desperate attempt to salvage what he'd lost. I didn't hate them. I just didn't need them. That was the difference. Jonas knocked then, his usual hesitant smile in place. Hey, boss. Got a message from HR. Some of the newer hires want to throw a small get-together tonight. Nothing fancy, just pizza and beer on the rooftop. They said it's been a hell of a month, and they want to celebrate. You in? I blinked. The idea so foreign it almost felt like a trick. Celebrate? I asked, half laughing. What exactly are we celebrating? Jonas grinned. You. Us. The fact that we're still here and that no one threw wine at us this week. Take your pick. He hesitated. Seriously, Marcus. They want to see you. They respect you. Even after everything. I looked at Dion, who raised an eyebrow, her expression daring me to say no. I laughed then, the sound unexpected but welcome. All right, I said, standing. Pizza and beer. I can handle that. The rooftop had always been my favorite place in the building. It overlooked the city like a promise, the lights twinkling in the distance, the Bay Bridge stretching out like a lifeline. I stepped out into the cool night air, the breeze carrying the scent of salt and asphalt. The team had set up folding tables with stacks of pizza boxes and a cooler full of beer. They cheered when I arrived, and for a moment I felt something I hadn't felt in weeks at home. Marcus, one of the new hires, a kid named Ryan, grinned as he handed me a paper plate. Grab a slice. You've earned it. His eyes shone with that same hungry ambition I'd carried in my early days, and it hit me how far we'd come. How far I'd come. I took a slice and leaned against the railing, watching my team laugh and share stories, the weight of the last few months lifting like fog burned away by the sun. Dion joined me, beer in hand, her grin matching mine. You know, she said, I think this is what victory looks like. Not headlines or press releases. Just people who believe in you, who want to celebrate with you. That's the real prize. I nodded, the truth of her words settling deep in my chest. Yeah, I said, my voice low. That's the best part. It's not about the contracts or the money. It's about knowing that when the world tried to buy me, I didn't sell. She raised her bottle, clinking it gently against mine. To Ellison Dynamics, she said. Built on respect. Earned every inch of the way. I clinked mine back, feeling the cool glass against my fingers. To us, I said. And to never letting them define us again. The laughter around us felt like music, the city lights a stage for something honest, something real. And as I stood there, watching my team, the family I'd chosen, I felt a kind of peace I'd never known before. A peace that came not from winning, but from standing up, from refusing to bow, from knowing I'd never again let anyone put a price on my worth. Because peace wasn't just the absence of conflict. It was the presence of self-respect. And in that moment, I knew I had both. Zurich was colder than I'd expected. The air was crisp with a bite that made every breath feel clean, untainted. The city sprawled with an old-world elegance, cobblestone streets, sharp-angled rooftops, and small cafes where people lingered over espresso and soft laughter. I stood outside the conference hall, scanning the name badges on the crowd. Every face held ambition, every handshake felt measured. But I wasn't here to trade small talk with suits trying to score contracts. I was here because I wanted to build something real. Nadine Wu found me by the coffee cart, her presence as grounded and no-nonsense as her code. A systems architect who'd cut her teeth on military defense projects, she had a reputation for cutting through the noise. She wore a simple blazer and jeans, her hair in a neat ponytail, her eyes sharp and alive. "Ellison," she said, her tone brisk but warm. "Finally meet the man who walked away from old money like it was pocket change." I grinned, extending my hand. "Nadine, I've read your white papers on adaptive systems, brilliant stuff." She shook my hand firmly, no hesitation. "I've read yours too. Your approach to threat detection is elegant. It's rare to see that kind of clarity in a world that thrives on chaos." Her eyes held a glint of respect that felt earned, not given. We found a table near the back, the noise of the conference fading as we settled in. Nadine pulled out her tablet, fingers flying across the screen as she sketched out a rough architecture diagram. "Look," she said, her tone focused. "What I've been building, what I want to build, doesn't care about legacy or politics. It's about resilience. Systems that can't be taken down by some idiot with a grudge. You've got the encryption. I've got the adaptive frameworks. Together, we could build something no one's ever seen before." Her words lit a fire in me. This wasn't about contracts or profits. This was about possibility. "That's the only question that matters," I said. "What are we building next?" She smiled, a real one. "I'm glad you get it. Most people want me to talk about stock options and IPOs. I want to talk about tomorrow." She paused. I steady. "I don't care what happened back in Portland. I care about now. About the future." It was exactly what I needed to hear. No baggage. No reputation games. Just two people who wanted to build something that would outlast the noise. I leaned forward, feeling that spark that had brought me to tech in the first place. "All right," I said, my voice low but sure. "Let's build it. Together." She held out her hand again, that same steady grip. "Deal." As I shook her hand, I felt a quiet certainty settle into my bones. This was what respect felt like, not something inherited, not something bought, but something earned one conversation, one partnership at a time. 3 years later, Ellison Dynamics was more than a company. It was a statement, a reminder that integrity, respect, and real partnerships could build something lasting. We weren't the biggest, but every client we took on felt like a choice, not a compromise. I'd learned that the hard way. I stood at the edge of a conference stage, my name on the screen behind me, a microphone in my hand. The crowd was a mix of young engineers, seasoned executives, and journalists hungry for a quote. But I wasn't here to please them. I was here to remind them that every name on a contract mattered. I took a breath and let the silence stretch before I started. 3 years ago, I began. I was asked to pay $400,000 for the privilege of marrying someone. For $100,000. A few heads nodded, some gasped. I declined. A ripple of laughter moved through the room. Because I'd spent my life paying in sweat, in time, in sacrifice. I knew that dignity wasn't a transaction. It's a foundation. I paused, letting the words hang in the air. My eyes scanned the crowd, and I saw faces light up with recognition, with understanding. These were the people who'd lived their own versions of that story, too many times told to shrink, to play small, to pay up to be respected. At Ellison Dynamics, I continued, we don't sell dignity. We don't buy respect. We build it, one contract at a time, one handshake at a time. After the applause, a young engineer raised her hand. She couldn't have been more than 25, eyes wide, eager. "How do you know when it's time to walk away?" she asked, her voice soft but steady. I met her gaze, remembering the wine dripping down my face, Riley's laughter echoing in my ears. "When the cost of staying is your self-respect," I said. "That's when you walk. No contract, no relationship, no paycheck is worth more than your dignity. Because the moment you let someone put a price tag on who you are, you've sold more than you'll ever earn back." Another hand shot up. A man in a crisp suit, probably mid-30s. "How did you rebuild after you walked away?" he asked. "How did you find the strength?" I smiled, a real one. by remembering why I started in the first place. My parents taught me that you don't have to be born into respect to deserve it. You just have to refuse to sell it. I paused. I found strength by surrounding myself with people who believed in what we were building, not what they could take from me. And every time I wondered if it was worth it, I looked at the team that stood beside me, and I knew I wasn't alone. The room was quiet now, the hum of applause lingering. I took a breath. So if you're out there, I said, my voice firm but kind, and someone's asking you to pay for respect, to trade your worth for a seat at the table, remember this. Silence isn't grace. It's permission. The moment you say, that's enough, everything changes. And it starts with you. I set the microphone down, feeling the weight lift off my chest. I'd built this place, this moment, from the ground up. And now, I wasn't just leading a company. I was showing people like me, that they could stand up too, that they could say no, that they could build something that couldn't be bought, no matter how many zeros were in the offer. Because dignity isn't for sale. And respect, once earned, is worth every sleepless night, every sacrifice, every step that made me the man I'd become.